All right, the groove is on. Welcome to the show on Shaw, episode number 158, fifth episode of season 8. And so glad to have you along with us. Our musical guest right in behind me. We have the Kerplunks, born out of the hills of Gabriola and sharing great kids' music across the land. I'm very excited to have Dinah D, JoJo, Cathy, and Chip Whipper here on the show. Stay tuned for some tunes enjoyable by kids and older kids, and we'll chat about their newest album, Lullabies for Big Eyes. Also on the show today, we never come at you with brute force. Today we're coming at you with Brant force. Looking ahead at the 2019 Brant Wildlife Festival, and as part of that, the Pacific Brant Carving and Art Show. You should definitely check it out because what's good for the goose is good for going and taking a gander. All right, Brian Sugiyama, he's used to having yogurt with omega oils for breakfast, so for his dinner, we're bringing him in to open up his world to yoga with essential oils. They're going to try it. You should try it too, because after all, if he can stretch this, eucalyptus. Now the deadline for tax time is almost here, so we've got some financial tips for you and some budget tips as well. Bribing your child's way into university is not one of them. To close off the show, we're going to meet a storyteller and a broadcaster with an event coming up on World Storytelling Week. But to kick off the show on Seniors Connect, we're going to talk about how dogs are awesome, of course, and rescue dogs in particular. And we're also going to let you know how you can support an upcoming Rescue Dog Beer and Burger fundraiser, because a Rescue Dog Beer and Hot Dog fundraiser is a bit of a cruel option, so I'm glad they went with the burgers. Anyways, we are dashing through the snow to be retrievers of stories, some all terrier Tories. Chow chow down on the show on Shaw.
Matt, yes, today on the Seniors Connect segment, the segment that looks at the reduction of social isolation of older adults, we are going to the dogs, literally. We are going to be talking today about the importance of adopting senior dogs and how it can be super beneficial to older adults in helping reduce social isolation. And we'll also be giving you a little bit of information about an upcoming event that supports a senior dog rescue here in Nanaimo. I'm really excited today to have as my guest. This is Cooper, who you saw a moment ago, and Cooper is a rescue dog from Mexico. And I'm really, really excited to have Cooper's foster mother, Kelsey Canhoffen, who is here from Rosier Days Dog Rescue, to share some information with us about the importance of adopting older dogs. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited that you could come. I wish people could have seen Cooper's reaction when he saw Kelsey in the parking lot. She hasn't seen him since the day we adopted him.
Yes.
So Kelsey, tell our guests, our audience, a little bit about Cooper, aka Thomas's backstory.
Yeah. So I found out about him probably earlier in 2018. The woman who runs the rescue in Mexico where we were had found him. He had been pretty bloodied and beat up by a lot of the other local dogs, as well as had a massive tumor hanging. And it's not uncommon in Mexico for people who have pets that get ill to just kind of pass them off to the street, because it's just more than they know what to deal with. So that's when Backstreet Dogs found him, and I kind of followed his story. And when I went down in Mexico in September last year is when I got to meet him for the first time.
All right, so now Cooper is approximately how old?
I mean, he's anywhere from sort of 9 to 10 years old, probably.
So that's pretty senior for a lab. So we figure Cooper is mostly lab, maybe has a little hound in him.
Yeah, I see a lot of hound dog when I had him, that's for sure.
And when you brought him in, obviously, a 9-year-old dog, there has to be some concern there, because how easily is it to get people to step up and adopt an older dog?
Yeah, I mean, it really is a gamble, and I went down there. I have a couple dogs of my own who are pretty picky about what dogs kind of they'll get along with, so I really wasn't sure who the right fit for me as a foster would be. And I was all but ready to leave without one, and then I met Thomas, and it was just a kind of a made-for-TV moment. The second I met him, I cried, the shelter woman cried. It was one of those dresses, how you know you're supposed to get married because you cry in the dress, and that's how I knew who the foster dog was, because I cried when I met him. And nobody wanted him. Nobody would take the risk in that he might have medical issues or that they wouldn't find a home. And Rosier Days Rescue that I went down there with, they just have such a heart for seniors. And we were prepared to live out his days in my home if that's what it took. I mean, we wanted him to find a ewe, and we're happy he did, but we were prepared for whatever happened. He just needed to get out of there and get to experience life before he died.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things that I will share with our audience is I had some big concerns before I would step up and adopt a 9-year-old dog. Obviously, Cooper, he has some health issues. He has a bad hip. He's a little bit blind in one eye. He is missing most of his teeth. But as people can see, he is a kind, loving, gentle soul. And even though I wasn't thinking I was going to adopt a senior dog, as an older person, I am thrilled at having a dog who is so quiet, so calm. He was obviously someone's pet because he was very well socialized when I got him. Now, tell me a little bit, I know you've even adopted older dogs out of Rosier days. Can you tell me a little bit about the most recent senior who came?
Yeah, the most recent senior we got into care, her name is Inky Binky, and she is a Chihuahua about this big, no teeth, just a big old tongue that hangs out. And she was pretty sick and was in a shelter in California and was going to probably die there. But like I said, I've worked with a lot of rescues, and Rosier Days is one of the most passionate about senior animals that I have come across. So, I mean, the older and sadder, the more they're going to welcome them with open arms. So little Inky Minky's 14, and she just got adopted too. So, you know, everybody has a heart for somebody, and I think what you're doing to sort of highlight him and the importance of what seniors still have to give, both human and canine, is just, it's so important. You know, he has so much to offer.
Well, the bond between us is way stronger than I ever thought it would be, because I had a dog before him. It took me 9 years to get over the passing of my last dog, and I was really unsure. And then I was all worried, well, what if I get him and he only lives a couple of years? And then what changed my mind after getting Cooper, I live in the moment. We take each day, it's a gift. I'm so glad to have him. One of the things that Emily, who started Rosier Days Dog Rescue, she was really wonderful and with sharing with me what your expectations were for me as an adoptee, in that I think her words were, give him a loving, caring home until he passes. That's all we can ask of you, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you guys did his vet bills, you did his teeth. I mean, it was incredible what you did for this dog. And we are super grateful. Now, you have more than one dog rescue. It's not just in Victoria, right?
Yes, there are locations in Squamish and Calgary as well, so it's pretty spread out. And generally, the rescues come in from California and Mexico as well, where there are so many and such a chance of not making it.
Okay. So, I mean, people can go on the Rosier Days website. You're in between crews. The last crew just got adopted. You'll be going in the spring and getting some more dogs, I assume?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly what time next year, but there's always plans for more.
Okay. Someone else who here in Nanaimo who does really great work is a group called Mutts for Mutts Seniors Dog Rescue. And they are going to be holding an event on April the 14th at Carlos O'Brien's. And it is an organization that actually takes in senior dogs. So if you're an older person and you're really worried that your dog is not going to have a forever home when something happens to you, I really strongly encourage you to learn more about Mutts for Mutts Senior Dog Rescue and to head over to Carlos O'Brien's and help these people, help senior dogs stay housed for the rest of their life. Thank you so much, Kelsey, for being my guest today.
Thank you
I know
for having
Cooper
me.
is really thrilled to see you.
He's having a tough life, so clearly.
So now I'm going to throw things over to Cathy Holmes, who's going to take us from the dogs to the ducks.
Well, maybe not the ducks, but certainly the geese, Brant geese. And my dear new friend, this beautiful, beautiful Brant, which by the way, I thought was a Canada goose because I didn't know any better. We're gonna get educated all about geese right this very moment. Our guest, Carrie Pesey from Brant Wildlife Festival, is gonna share some information with us about an upcoming event. In the meantime, I think Bobby Brant, I think I'll call you Bobby, yes I will. So tell us a little bit more about the Brant Wildlife Festival.
Alrighty. The Brant Wildlife Wildlife Festival is an amazing event. It runs from basically mid-March to mid-April. It centers around the Brant goose, and the Brant goose is a small sea goose, not to be confused with the Canada goose. It travels just on the sea and onto shorelines. And it's traveling from Mexico to Alaska, is the farther to where they breed and brood and all that they do, and no geese travels that far for that.
That's incredible. And it's heading to Rathtrevor Beach, so it's becoming having a local vacation in our own Parksville.
That's right. We're almost the Brant experts. They land in both beaches, all the beaches along the shoreline, and they often time it with the herring run, and so they eat the roe, but you have to be really careful with them because they're very skittish, and this is where they rest and they eat, so dogs are not allowed on the beach.
And that's understandable. Even Cooper, who apparently doesn't really want to chase anything anyway, Cooper won't be chasing those geese. But listen, that festival has so much to offer. We have some photographs about some of the events, I guess, that historically have been at the festival, so maybe we should talk a little bit about those. Okay, first of all, we should remind people that the festival itself runs from March 18th to April 20th, right? So what's this first photograph about?
Well, that's part of the Mount Aerosmith Biosphere VIU wing. They do a BioBlitz, and that's sort of for citizen science. You go, you investigate the plants, you investigate whatever you come across, and do a report.
And this big team of people does some of that work. Fabulous. So what about actually being on the beach and checking the birds out? What's the deal with that? There's a picture up there of the view of what it looks like to be around those birds.
Yeah. There are a lot of bird-related events happening, and a lot of it you're viewing them from a distance. There are bird identification events. There are Brant-specific events. It's amazing.
Fantastic. So, and how many people get involved? There's a woman up there who's holding not a brand, but it looks like a hawk or an eagle. What's up with her?
That's the eagle release.
Yes.
And that's done with North Island Wildlife Recovery Association. They have eagles that they rehabilitate, and every year they release one. And that's Lynn Brooks releasing an eagle.
Well, she does incredible work, doesn't she? Yeah. The angel of the birds.
Oh, and she's got her fingers in every environmental pie. She's amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And is that you that's walking on the boardwalk up there, or something
no, it's
that?
not.
Okay, well, there we go.
Yeah, that's Hamilton Marsh, and that is the largest wetland between Nanaimo, Port Alberni, and Cumberland. It feeds 3 watersheds, and it's the most prolific waterfowl brood marsh. It's a little known place that everyone drives by when they go from Qualicum to Coombs.
Oh my gosh, I have to go and check it out. How amazing. So with the Brant Wildlife Festival, I'm going from the times of March 18th to 20th of April, you said that there's a whole bunch of events that are going on. Can you maybe give us a little bit of a dish on what that looks like?
There's 2 amazing movies happening. One is Call of the Forest, and there's a film and a panel. Yes. Another one is Winged Migration, which is perfect if you want to go and do something light, and you can't necessarily hike trails and things. Yes. That's really great. We also have 2 amazing events more along the artistry end of things. Elegant Threads, and that's the Qualicum Beach Weavers and Spinners, and if you are a shopper for top quality things, they're
have to talk about.
Oh, you must.
Absolutely.
Yes, and the Pacific Brant Carving Show also is going to be amazing, but you're going to hear more about that later.
Yes, we are. And we really should let people know as we're going to that segment, which we're going to fairly shortly, is that this bird, although it feels real, is a carving. And I can't wait till Matt shares all about this. But the reality is that birds that are coming to our part of the world need to have conservatory, you know what I mean. The word that I'm looking for, I can't find it this very moment because I'm attached to this beautiful bird, but tell me about some of the conservative ways that we're going, conservation-wise.
Well, I can tell you, as far as the Brant geese goes, they have to feed and rest, and that's really important. There's so many bird events this year. It's totally worth looking at. What I really want to talk about is weddings for wildlife.
Oh yes, of course, weddings for wildlife.
Yeah.
Yes, let's go there.
Yeah, so a couple of us wanted to give back, and I'm a wedding celebrant, and I have another one named Jane Good, and we have a beautiful photographer, Innocent Thunder Photography and Vertgen Gardens. They do the beautiful nature bouquets that are grown grown, not flown. And so what we're doing is we're giving back. So for a $250 donation to the Nature Trust, which comes back to the Brant Wildlife Festival, we will legally marry you. And it's just north of the Shady at the Seaside Nature Park.
Well.
No. So we're beyond excited to have that opportunity.
Well, I think that the idea for some people, this is wedding season coming up, right? So if you're about to take on that new partner, what a wonderful way to go about doing that.
And it's beautiful because not everybody wants 12 bridesmaids in matching
Exactly.
dresses. They just want to seal the deal. So.
Yeah, sealing the deal under, you know, the prettiest possible conditions that you can imagine, for sure.
Yeah, and investing in nature.
And investing in nature. Well, Bobby, I have to tell you, it has been an absolute treasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for coming on this show today. I'm going to roll this over to Mr. Matt Carter, who's going to talk to the father, the creator. Isn't she so pretty?
Is her name Bobby?
I've called
like Bobby up and down in the water? Is that the idea?
Oh, there we go.
Bobby up
Bobby.
and down. Bobby up and down in the water. I thought that was a pun.
Bobby. Bobby, I'm going to give you a kiss now, okay? Bye-bye, Bobby.
Quick, duck and cover.
Duck and cover. Quick, run.
As you duck. Anyways.
Boing.
Finally,
Careful with her. She's precious.
I finally got Cathy's goose. All right. Well, I will take the Brant back over here, and I think on the far side, is this the best place? Or no? I'll let the artists here decide. Perfect. Thank you so much, Cathy, and thank you, Bobby, as well. So, all right, as mentioned, yes, the Brant Festival coming up, and now we're going to take a slide to the artistic side of things, and again, we're going to talk about the art. Some folks involved with the art side of things. It's the Pacific Brant Carving and Art Show. On the far side of me, Art Show Chair Bill Beasy, and representing the Oceanside Carving Club, James Kyle. Welcome both of you to the program.
Thanks very much.
Very glad. You know, but first, before we get into the art and the event itself, I was interested in doing sort of research about both of you. You both have a bit of a academic and research background in forestry. Yes. Before getting to the art side of things. So maybe just tell our viewers a little bit about what your background is academically first in terms of forestry.
Well, academically, we're both graduates of UBC. I then went to Duke University and then to the University of Aberdeen in Scotland and came home with a Scots accent. And I have been teaching in forest fire research for my academic career. And I started carving about 25 years ago. So that's a quick summary.
All right, we're glad to have you here on the coast after, again, all this time overseas and across the country.
I was born and raised in Vancouver, so I had to come back.
There we go. Yes, the bird returns to the coop, as it were. We're going to talk about your carving here a little bit later on. Bill, same thing. What's your background in forestry leading to now background?
So I spent about 30 years working for various forest companies and research here on the BC coast. And then about 9 years ago, I started teaching at VIU. We have a 2-year technical diploma program, and so I teach forest ecology and botany there.
Very cool. All right, so let's talk a bit about the Pacific Brant Carving and Art Show. For me, doing research on it, I had no idea that sort of competitive carving was a thing, and I know that's not the only part of the show, but tell our viewers a little bit about what sort of things are being put together for this event, and what can people going to the show expect to see?
Well, you'll see a lot of birds there, but you'll also see other types of carving, like what Jim's going to talk about with his. With the birds, there's different levels of detail. So you've got carvings that are decoys that are made to float realistically and have a more simple paint job. You've got what we call in the business smoothies, like the Brant that your other host adopted. And so that's a smooth finish and a fancy paint job. And then you get into the detailed feathering on some birds. And that's when I'm going to demonstrate a bit later with the wood burner in order to get the detailed feathers in it. And you might see some miniature birds. So we've got big Brant and we've got little mini Brant as well.
Nice. And looking at, again, as you mentioned, different styles of carvings, again, mostly about birds, but not always. But also I notice there's different levels of competition too, so from beginners all the way up to masters. So folks getting involved for the first time, people that can, I guess, learn from each other.
Yeah, the novices can come in with no experience at all and progress through from novice to intermediate to advanced to expert, and this is an example of intermediate. That's as far as I've got so far in 25 years.
My untrained eye, that looks like pretty an expert thing. So yeah, why don't you tell us about this now then? So this is,
Well,
it's a griffin.
This is a griffin, and it is made with butternut, which is a close relative of black walnut, and it's made with various gouges and chisels. For instance, this kind of a deep cut would require a gouge that has quite a degree of curvature. If it's a flat piece, something like this down here, then it would be a gouge that is quite flat in its curvature. And that would allow you to take off as much as you needed to take off, and you hope that if you take off too much, you can always recover and say, well, that's the way it meant to be.
The creatives, exactly. And you were actually saying too, you were talking off air, it actually was 3 different types of wood went together to
There's
create
3
this?
pieces of wood, and you can't get a piece of wood that wide these days that won't either cup or split on you, or so there's 3 that have been joined together, and if you're skillful enough, you make the joins so that they're not visible.
Wonderful job here. You mentioned butternut. I usually thought of that as a squash or a soup, not as a type of wood. So are there certain types of wood that you prefer to use when carving, or is it more just about aesthetic reasons? Or
Very often it's a case of what kind of wood was donated to you. But I have carved in the local woods, yellow cedar, red cedar, broadleaf maple. I've carved in black walnut, butternut, eastern maple, and I think eastern maple is misnamed. Should be called marble, it's so hard. It's what some folks would call mallet wood. That is, you're working with a gouge and a mallet all the time.
an equal opportunity forester. Here we go.
Well, yeah, as I say, whatever's donated.
It works out. All right, Bill, we'll throw things over to you for a sec. You've brought some tools as well to demonstrate sort of wood burning and sort of, if I got that right, about how to create the feathers on the birds we see in some of these great examples. So
Sure.
I'll let you take over here and yeah, show how that works.
So this particular bird, I'll kind of let the camera zoom in, and this has detail in the feather burning to try to create as realistic effect as possible. If you just did these cuts with a knife, they would close right up, but with the burner, they stay open. So I will just put on my little equipment here. I need to get some magnification, and I use this fancy burner. This is one that's made in Saskatchewan by Cam Merkel, Razor Tip Industries. It's the best burner on the market. And I've got a little feather here, and I'm going to just demonstrate a couple of lines of the burning. The general idea is that you get as close as possible to get the detail, and you try to create a burning line that's as close as possible to the last line. And do them one at a time. And if you mess up, you can kind of go over it again, and while somebody's not looking, it's not, it's tedious, but not as tedious as a solo climb of El Capitan.
I was going to ask, some of the birds we see in front of you here, about how long do you think the carver would take to...
So that's the general idea there.
How long do you think how long would it take for a carver to sort of do like one of the birds we see here in front of us?
Well, it really depends on the level of detail. So going from the decoy, you're talking about probably 30 or 40 hours for a decoy, 50 or 60 for a smoothie, and I've got about 200 in the merganser.
Impressive stuff. All right, Bill, James, thank you both very, very much for joining us today. Give a shout out again to the Pacific Brant Carving Art Show as part of the Brant Wildlife Festival taking place, and correct me if I'm wrong, April 6th and April 7th. I believe 10 to 5 the first day,
Yep.
10 to 4 the second day.
And it's 3 shows in one. You've got
That's right.
art, you've got woodworking, and you've also got the carving. You've got professional artists like Morgan Warren, Gail Bierman, Sue Coleman, that are selling their works there as well.
Art show, I know seminars as well. So much for to look forward to. Again, check out the website, thebrant.ca, for more information on the event. And thank you both again for sharing your talents and information about the show with us on the show.
Most welcome. Thank
Great,
you.
thanks, Matt.
You're very welcome. All right, so again, do check that out. Now it's right time from carvers of wood to cravers of songs. Let's send it over to the Kerplunks on the show on Shaw.
Look, Ma, no hands. Jojo loves to ride through the puddles. Sometimes she gets stuck in the middle. She falls over and she gets a bit muddy. It doesn't matter 'cause she's still my buddy. And look, Mom, no hands, B-I-C-Y-C-L-E. She rides a B-I-C-Y-C-L-E. Jojo rides a B-I-C-Y-C-L-E. She loves a B-I-C-Y-C-L-E. My buddy Dinah likes the downhill race. Well, she wears a helmet just in case. When she's at the top, you know she checks her brakes. Check your brakes, y'all. Check your brakes, y'all. Well, she rides her bike all over the place. Look, Ma, no hands, B-I-C-Y-C-L. Dinah rides a B-I-C-Y-C-L. Yeah, she rides a B-I-C-Y-C-L. Loves to ride a B-I-C-Y-C-L.
Break it down, Matt Carter.
Right, ride my bike.
I like to ride my bike, I don't need no car, 'cause when I ride my bike, I can go real far. I don't have a motor, so I don't use gas. I wave at my friends when I pass them real fast, yo. Bye-bye.
Right, I'm riding my bike. Bike, I'm a bike. Tell the Lorco, riding on my new Norco.
B-I-C-Y-C-L-E. I ride my B-I-C-Y-C-L-E. Everybody rides a B-I-C-Y-C-L-E. Man, he rides his B-I-C-Y-C-L-E. Ride my B-I-C-Y-C-L-E. Everybody rides your B-I-C-Y-C-L-E.
The pedal to the metal, what?
B-I-C-Y-C-L. Come on, let's get our B-I-C-Y-C-L. Look, Mom, no hands.
Thank you to the Kerplunks. I'm here with Megan Bailey, and we're going to talk about essential oils and yoga. And you may have wondered, what are essential oils? And maybe, Megan, you can tell us a little bit about where they come from.
Sure. The oils, they come from all over the world. They're part of plants. And they come from either being steam distilled or cold pressed. And so it's a concentrated part of the plant.
Much like virgin olive oil, right?
Yeah. Except
Okay.
they're not fatty. They absorb into our skin and they're very light.
So with essential oils, and people hear about them, they can certainly use for applications. They can use a diffuser like we have just over your shoulder here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or you take it involved in your yoga classes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yoga is experiential. It's personal. It's different for every person, just like the oils are. So sometimes you'll hear them say that a citrus oil is really uplifting. So we've got some grapefruit. And a lot of people find it really light, refreshing, but it's just personalized. Some people love it. Some people prefer lemon. And so just like the yoga, it has to be experienced. The oils are the same. That there is Health Canada approved uses for many of them for certain conditions. And yet what one person thrives on, another person may prefer a different oil. So it's really just getting them on and using them.
Now you use them in yoga classes.
I do.
They result in a certain kind of atmosphere, a certain feeling.
It does. When people walk in the studio, they often pause and they take this big breath, and it's different. It has a different atmosphere to it. And we tend to adjust the oils depending on the season, depending on the weather, depending on what's happening in the environment in our world. Yeah.
So this time of year, which is, we're starting to break into spring, the blooms, the blossoms, the budding out, what would be the oils you would employ right now?
Well, with the changing weather, some people get some headaches with the changing pressure. So we've been using some that are good for headaches. So So we take a little peppermint and rub it around the temples and along the hairline, back of the neck. Breathe in nice and deep for sinuses. Sometimes cough and cold season for chest congestion. Some of them are Health Canada approved for that, as people are, they generously stay home if they are ill, but when they come back into the studio, a little bit of lung support. Yep, after big meals where there's seasons.
So peppermint is one of those stronger essential oils.
Yeah, and it's really about personal preference and what people enjoy. Peppermint is a favorite. Lots of people know about peppermint tea, peppermint flavored items. So peppermint is a nice intro oil.
Okay, and what's some of the other ones you employ? I know you use lemon, which
We
is a good...
use lots of lemon. Lemon is a really accessible one, especially in the darker days of winter. Lemon is photosensitive, so we don't tend to not use it during the summer in case people put it on their skin and then go out in the sun. We wouldn't want them to get burned. But in the winter and those darker, longer days, or darker, longer nights, a lot of people find lemon really uplifting.
So as the weather's now changing, it's getting warmer, so we're going to look at some other ones, obviously.
Yeah, so lavender is one of my favorites this time of year. I love lavender. I rub it over my face, over my sinuses, breathe it in deeply. I use it before bed. Lavenders are really good this time of year. In terms of yoga for meditation, near the end, I often choose things like sacred frankincense or patchouli, some of the more calming, grounding oils.
And you mix some of these oils yourself?
These ones are blends that came mixed up, but absolutely in the studio sometimes we'll take a drop of peppermint and a drop of lavender together. Yep, sometimes we will mix them ourselves.
Well, let's go down to the mat and employ the use of some essential oils.
Absolutely.
Good, let's do that.
Okay, let's grab some of these.
Okay.
And on our mat, where would you like to sit?
How about right
You're going to sit right here? Okay. Take a seat.
Okay.
And you'll notice I put out a cushion for each of us.
Okay.
Cushions and supports in our practice help make it accessible.
Okay.
So when you're sitting, not everybody finds sitting on the floor super comfortable right at the beginning. And cushions under our hips helps with maybe if we have tight hips, tight low back, helps us with that natural curve in our low back. And oftentimes when we first sit down, we take an oil and it helps us take a deep breath. So you're going to take one drop in your hand.
Okay.
And then one of the staff members here, she's lovely, she commented when we were first getting it set up, she said, oh, I wish it was smell-o-vision. Because you take the oil and it takes you into your practice. When you focus on your breath, the scent, you notice how you feel when you take it in, and you start to pay attention to your breath when we first sit down and practice. And you notice where you're sitting. You notice your posture. And yoga, it doesn't have to all be all about turning ourselves into a pretzel. It's about sitting and breathing and noticing how you feel. And when we take those first deep breaths with our oils at the beginning of practice, it's checking in and noticing your physical body, your mood, your energy level. And every person's different for every practice. And when you stop and take those breaths at the beginning, you take this practice for what it is today.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Great.
and so when you're sitting up tall, right, we engage our low tummy for a little bit of back support. Our shoulders are back. And sometimes yoga practice can be as simple as sitting and breathing. And then if you can take your legs out in front and start to say good afternoon to those hamstrings. And as you sit up tall, Dandasana, staff pose this is called, pressing through your feet and sitting up tall, saying hello to your hamstrings, because yoga is that balance of stability and strength. And yoga, sometimes people in their forward fold, in Paschimottanasana, their tummies on their thighs, their faces on their shin, they're folded over like a sandwich. And some of us will feel our hamstrings when we're here. And this is our forward fold, which is what I find so accessible about yoga with the oils as well, that each person has their own depth and intensity. And so even as you start to walk your fingers forward and you lift your chest, so you might be here and someone else might be there. And I think that that's going to be the extent of our practice today.
Okay.
I know.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thank
That's
you
been
so
wonderful.
much for
There's
inviting me
certainly
along to
more
share.
information.
Oh my
People
gosh,
can,
so much information.
People can look on your Facebook site?
Yeah,
and
Nanaimo
get info-
Yoga Sanctuary.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And you're right in town,
Yes.
right here.
Bird Sanctuary Drive.
Bird Sanctuary Drive, right near the university and NDSS. Well, let's head back over with Matt and our musical guests, the Kerplunks.
Thank
you
you.
very, very much, Brian. Thanks, Megan, as well, for joining us. Yes, this is the best the studio has ever smelt, that's for sure. Also a lavender fan. Not oil be darned, but oil be loved. And so, it does really smell great in here. Anyways, going from smelling great to sounding great. Very happy to talk to our musical guests, the Kerplunks. And
I thought maybe I was smelling great.
well, you are
It's not
too.
me.
Absolutely,
Well,
yeah.
that's great. Okay.
No, I'm sure that the star outfit here looked like has been washed at least once in the last millennium. Is it-
Absolutely, once in the last millennium, indeed.
Once in a millennium. Anyways, Dinah D.
Yes.
Before we get started, this is Dinah D, everyone, right here. Dinah D, lead singer of the Kerplunks, bass player. What's the album first off you're holding
This
there?
is our new album. It's called Lullabies for Big Eyes. It's all lullabies. It's an hour and 5 minutes of major sleeping music.
And I'm going to ask you about
Yes.
this a little bit later on. First off, who are the members of the band here? Let's
yeah.
throw the camera around and tell us who we've got on stage.
So this is Jocelyn Hallett. We call her JoJo, and she's our newest member, our shiniest newest member. And to your right, I suppose, is Aaron Cadwallader on guitar, and standing between them is Phil Whipper, and he plays drums in our band.
Fine folks, all of them.
Oh, absolutely, the best people you could have in the business.
I think really, if you're going to play children's music, you got to be a pretty fine folk to begin with. So,
Yeah.
what is it about? Because I know you've played jazz, lots of other genres and stuff. What is
Mm-hmm.
it about that drew you to start working on and writing kids' music?
Well, kids' music is really fun, and obviously, I tend to write really weird, quirky stuff. Like I've got that serious side, but then there's the quirky stuff. So this ended up being a really fun project, and we all get together and we write songs about things like bicycles. And our instruments and all that kind of stuff. And so it's been really fun journey. 15 years now.
15 years.
Yeah, that's when the band started. Yep. So we've been going at it for a while here, and we really like it. Like, it's nice to see those familiar faces in the industry, especially the kids' music people that we've looked up to for many years, and now they're sort of giving us a nod, going, "Hey, all right, 15 years, you're doing it.
I was
Good."
going to ask you about that too, because I know a lot of reviewers, especially around our age, grew up listening to folks like Raffi, Fred Penner, Sharon Lawson Bram.
Yeah.
Who are some of your influences, sort of in the kids' music scene, that maybe helped shape some of your songs?
Oh yeah, I grew up with Raffi records. I had every single Raffi album that there was. I never had the Banana Phone album, which is like a little past my time. And I listened to Sharon Lawson Bram when I was growing up, and Fred Penner, and sort of all those classics that you just mentioned. Basically, all those folks that kind of carved the roads for us to come along and cruise smoothly on them.
I do actually want to ask about that, because I know the band's been nominated and won a number of awards. You guys have been across the country even performing.
Yeah.
What was it like talking to other musicians or the children's musicians about success or about that sort of music genre in general?
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's so many people that play music, but not everybody plays kids music. So it's kind of a funny little exclusive genre, and there's a bunch of us. There's a whole bunch of new up-and-comers that are really great as well. So it's not just us. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other great bands that are also doing it and playing the music festivals and playing the kids festivals and just cruising around schools, stuff like that. Yeah.
So yeah, it shows
Yeah.
that something like that is really possible.
Yeah.
And from that, also going to your website, one of the first lines is something about it's like a children's song with a grown-up beat.
Yeah.
So how does that sort of work consciously with your songwriting to make music that's enjoyable by adults as well?
Yeah, well, it was actually somebody who reviewed one of our albums that gave us that. They said, kids music but grown-up groove. And we've always loved that. We sort of latched right on right away. That was off of our first album. We just latched right on because that's exactly what we do. We do like goofy lyrics, but totally groovy music. Yeah.
Okay,
so.
perfect. I only got a couple more minutes. So in a moment, I want to ask you about that album. But first, I believe you have a new web series you're putting together. Tell us about that.
We do. It's called Learn, Make, Play, and it's a mini series, mini web series. We're hoping to get it aired possibly on some sort of a syndicate or broadcasted somewhere, but for now we're just happy to host it somewhere on our website. So we're just getting a website built, and it's called Learn, Make, Play. So keep an eye out. It'll be there. We'll come and chat about it when it's ready to rock.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely like to have it
Okay,
back. So
cool.
that's for the eyes. Now for the ears,
Cool.
tell us about this new album, Lullabies for Big Eyes.
Yeah, so we went into several recording studios. I want to give your camera a chance to look at the full fold out of the artwork because it's really beautiful. We went into 3 different music studios and sort of pieced together this album with the 3 different dream people that we were working with and everything. So we feel really proud of it. This was our first album with all 4 of us in the band writing together as well. So we're really, really, really proud of it. And yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Now, I know like a lot of, again, the earlier albums had a lot of sort of funk to it at Edge, country rock. So what was it inspired you to sort of do an album just lullabies?
Well, we've always wanted to put people to sleep because we know we can make them dance. Right? So it's a total challenge. It's like, all right, we got a new awesome band member. Let's see what we can do that's completely different than what we've done this whole other time. So, yeah. So that's kind of what this lullaby album is all about.
Excellent. All right, so I want to give a shout out again to the website, Kerplunks.com right now to find more information. I know you've been telling me you got a series of school shows coming up in the North Island, and watch out for some tours coming up in this later spring and summer.
Yeah.
And so the song we're here right now is, tell us about it because it's from Lullabies from Big Eyes.
Okay, it's the first song on the album called Arms Round the Night, and it features all of us singing. So that's why we chose it for today.
Awesome, Dinah. Thanks to you. Great to have you in the band here. Let's have the Kerplunks here on the show.
Thank
on
you.
Shaw.
Close my eyes to the light that shines, my ears to the breeze, let it blow through my mind. Breathe as I'm in, breathe as I'm out, casting a call for the night. Clouds above and clouds behind, drifting through an endless sky. Waves washing in, waves washing out, casting for sleep for the night. All is gone and all is right. I'm on pause and ready for flight. Trees swaying left, trees swaying right, casting their arms round the night.
Always wonderful music there from their Kerplunks, from their brand new Lullabies for Big Eyes album, Arms Round the Night. We're looking forward to have some more music from the Kerplunks a bit later on, as well as some stories coming up in a little bit. But right now, we're going to go to the financial side of things, address, of course, that the deadline for tax time is coming up quickly on April 30th. So we're very pleased to bring a return guest into the show. We've had him talking about the Canadian pension plan in the past, holiday money saving tips in the past, and to be truthful, he's got more certifications behind his name than I have letters in mine. So very welcome back, Emeka Udeagha, financial advisor with IG Wealth Management, to the program. Emeka, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Very happy to have you back. And you mentioned off air, 5 years with IG Wealth Management now.
Yes. Been there 2014. I think I was last time I was here was 2016. So it's been quite a while.
Yeah, too long. Really glad to have you back. So, and actually, speaking of that, I just want to talk this little local thing. I know you have an MBA from VIU, but looking at a story from you, it looks like your original plan was to become a surgeon. Is that true?
Yes, it was. So my first degree is actually in biochemistry. So I've got 4-year. I was in college for 4 years to actually go to med school. Completed my biochemistry degree, and halfway through realized I love business a lot more than sciences. So sort of made the switch. So yeah, so it's been great. So.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'm not going to ask you any question about heart surgery then. Instead, we're going to ask you about wallet surgery instead and get some information for our viewers about taxes and savings. Let's start about savings, actually. So I'm not as financially literate as I probably should be, so I'm really stoked to ask you these questions. So let's talk about budgeting. What are some basic budget tips you can give to folks watching right now?
So, I mean, a lot of times if you read financial magazines or you watch financial videos, the rule of thumb or what they say is, a third of your income goes to savings. I always like to take a more conservative approach because everyone's got different things going on with their lives. So not a lot of people have stuff already allocated for the money they make. So how the approach I usually like to take is figure out what your income is, figure out what your expenses are, of course your discretionary, non-discretionary expenses. Then when we get to whether you have a surplus or deficit, then we can start talking savings as opposed to just throwing a percentage. If you do have a deficit, there's a problem. So we have to figure out a way to get you back to surplus. But if you have a surplus, then it's a matter of, okay, now we know what the number is. How much do we allocate towards your savings strategy? And how much do we allocate towards, throwing down to knock down, those consumer debt that people might have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because that's one thing I've heard about. It's sort of like is what you lose on your sort of debt financing, if that's more than what you make investing or saving, pay off the debt first instead of save. But that, not necessarily the right plan for everybody.
Well, and that's a good point you make. So that's why for me it's not a one size fits all approach. So you figure out what your surplus is, and then if you do have a lot of consumer debt, so if you've got thousands in credit card debt, it doesn't matter if you have surplus. The goal is now to try and knock down that debt because, say for instance, you're a moderate investor, you're looking at 4.5 to 6% on an average. Credit card interest is 20%. So, are we going to focus on trying to get you whatever the rate of return is at the expense of the debt? So again, it's having it done on a case-by-case basis. So we get the surplus. If you do have a lot of those consumer debts, credit cards, take care of that first, or as much as we can, and then focus on savings. A lot of times you can be able to do both of them at the same time. So you can still be able to save and knock the debts off at the same time.
All right, so let's get to that scenario where you do have a surplus and things coming in. And I know I sort of look at financial plan, I see, okay, there's mutual funds, there's tax-free savings accounts. How to decide RSPs, how to decide where to put that surplus then?
So, I mean, again, like for instance, I'll use the RSPs and TFSAs. A lot of people will ask me, well, which do I do? Either or. And for me, the question is not either or. The question is you should be doing both if you can, because they're two completely different things. The RSP was set up, so I'll give you a quick rundown of both of them. So the RSP is a registered retirement savings plan, and the way that works is you sort of get a deduction. So for every dollar you put in your RSP, you get that immediate tax deduction right away once you file your taxes. Now, the goal is you don't pay tax now, you pay tax in the future. So the CRA is just saying, hold up, don't pay us tax now, pay us the tax when you pull the money down the road. Now, assuming you're in a lower tax bracket, what happens is you're saving a higher tax now, and then you're paying a lower tax in the future. So you've got that tax reduction. The second benefit to the RSP is the tax deferral. So eventually you're going to pay tax on the money, but all that's happening is I'm 30 years old now, I'm not paying a tax now. The tax money can work for me till I'm 60, and then eventually at 60 I do pay the government back the tax. The TFSA, on the other hand, is totally different. Whatever money you put in there is considered after-tax dollars. So what that means is you've paid tax on the money. If that dollar grows to $5, that's all tax-free. So a lot of times for people, it shouldn't be a matter of which do I choose. If you can do both, I would actually encourage you to sort of take both because they're two completely, totally different things.
Nice. Yeah. Now you mentioned some taxes, and we should again mention a little bit about taxes, of course. So again, the tax season. We only have a minute or two left here, so maybe just quickly run down maybe a couple of deductions or savings that maybe a lot of folks might not consider when doing their taxes for this year.
So I mean, depending on what your age is, I'll just run down through a couple of things. I mean, if you've got medicals, of course, that's something you should actually have filed with your tax returns. Now, of course, it has to be at a minimum 3% of your income for it to actually start making sense. Of course, donations. If you have any donations given, you will get a receipt that you can actually claim with your taxes. A big one that a lot of people miss is actually the tuition. So a lot of students actually miss the tuition, and that's a big one because at the time they're actually in school, there's no, if you file your, it's called a T2202A, if you do file it that year, you usually won't get a cashback right away because it's not supposed to give you money immediately, it's supposed to help offset your taxes. So a lot of students actually let that slide. The negative to that is, once you finish school, you should have been able to accumulate all those credits. So once you start working and making the money, you can use your tuition credits to actually grind down your taxes, exactly. So that's a big one that a lot of people actually do let slip by.
All right, so Emeka, so getting to the end here. Thank you again so much for a lot of the information again. Do folks have any other questions, like to ask you some more questions? How can they get a hold of you?
By my email, so emeka.udeagha@investorsgroup.com, or they can give the office a call and set them in for an appointment.
Perfect, awesome. Always lots of great questions. We should have talked more, but thank you so much again for the, as our director Todd Jones says, a wealth of knowledge here to the show. All right, thanks, Emeka. Again, time to turn over now to someone, speaking of taxing interviews, her interviews are never taxing. In fact, there's always a great rate of return with Cathy Holmes. So Cathy, over to you.
Oh, I had such a good line, Matt. The truth of the matter is, when it comes to money, money is one thing, but there's always a deficit in some of them just equally as important things. And that deficit has to do with storytelling. Today, our guest is Seana, and I tried to say your name right, Kozar.
Kozar.
Kozar. Okay, I got it. I think I got it. But what's more interesting isn't your name, but the stories that you share with so many of us. You are a storyteller and creator of tales from the Treehouse Perilous, and you're also the host of Flying by Wireless on CHLY 101.7 every Monday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Yes. So let's start to unpack these pages. What is storytelling all about for you?
Well, I've told stories most of my life. My grandmother used to say that I didn't so much kiss the Blarney Stone as pocket it. I started to read from an early age. Yes. And when I got to school, I used to get into terrible trouble doing silent reading. I don't know if you had that in school.
Oh, I did indeed.
After lunch.
Yes.
Because I used to call the kids over to the library corner and tell them stories, which
wonderful.
Of course wasn't silent. It's just something that comes very naturally to me. I love to learn and research stories. I did misspend my youth doing a PhD in folklore, but that basically gives me a good research base when I'm looking at new folk tales or different kinds of world mythology that I like to tell. Tales from the Treehouse Perilous is my own original work. It draws on folk tales, legends, myths, but it's my own original story based on stories that I originally started telling my daughter when she was quite young. And last year I applied for a Canada Council grant for a research and creation grant in storytelling, and I got it. And that was designed to help me to be able to develop this whole story cycle. The title comes from Treehouse Perilous comes from Castle Perilous, which is the location where the Grail was kept in Arthurian legend. And also, when I was a little kid growing up in North Vancouver, we had a big cedar stump in our backyard, and rather than get rid of it, my father hollowed it out, put shakes on it for a roof, carved a door into it with a root for a handle, and put in some windows.
Oh,
and that treehouse was the center of my world.
Oh my goodness. And so from that came the creativity of a story you're going to share a little bit with us right now, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Let's go into the story.
In my story, there are 4 main characters. There's a girl called Lisellen Valiant. She goes by Lisa, and she doesn't think she's very valiant, but she grows into her name. There's another female character called Ellen Bird, who spent 1,000 years in the land of Fairy. There's a Nancy, who's of course the god of stories, and he takes care of the web. Because I think in any modern fantasy story, you can't completely get away from technology. So I think that the web would be a whole lot more fun if we had the god of stories looking after it. And another character who's very dear to my heart is a fellow who goes by the name of Robin Greenwood. And in this world, he's basically a landscaper, but he's actually a forest guardian who's able to heal the forest and basically any living thing other than himself, because he's under a kind of, not a curse, but there's something weighing on him that's preventing him from being able to heal himself. Now, in a previous chapter, he rescued Lisa and was bitten by Baba Yaga the witch. I don't know
Ooh,
if you've
Baba
ever.
Yaga.
I don't. Yeah. Well, she's really not just a witch. She's a nupir. She's a kind of vampire, and she bit him, and so he was wounded. And so at this excerpt that I'm going to tell you, Ellen has given him something to heal his wounds, and it's starting to work. So this is just him walking through the woods, going on the next part of his adventure.
All right.
And I want you to think of spring.
Okay, so we're in spring.
Yep.
We're ready.
So we're just walking with Rob.
We're walking with Rob.
Whatever Ellen put onto Rob's wound was beginning to work. Baba Yaga's bite had faded, and the grain of his forearm had grown around the punctures so that they looked just like regular knots. His arm was still sore, but he was pretty sure that he was not in any danger of any fever or infection. And so, all in all, he was feeling pretty good for an old stick. He quickened his pace a little bit, which, although quick for him, according to Anansi, was basically generational. He was making good time, covering good ground, and as he walked, beautiful lush foliage covered his tracks, and vibrant little creatures came into his wake. It was good to have seen his friend, and of course Melusine and her sons, they were always very welcoming, but he was of two minds about not having Anansi on this particular trip. He was going back to Ellen's shop to pick up Mina, because she would be next in the adventure. And he usually traveled with Anansi, and so he was initially feeling a little bit alone. He thought the trip would be quite solitary, but no sooner had he started than wee beasties and birds of every description surrounded him. And it made a trip with Anansi seem very quiet indeed. He could ignore the robins because they were in love with themselves anyway. They flew around him, and he just let them swagger and brag themselves into exhaustion. Now, the swallows were another case. They absolutely shamelessly chased after anything that moved, expected him to heal their broken hearts even while they eyed up their next conquests. And he just didn't know which way he was coming and going as he was walking along. By noon on the very first day, he had settled a property dispute between a pair of magpies, broken up half a dozen fights between the crows and the jays, and told a squirrel that he gossiped like an old henwife.
Wonderful.
And the little squirrel puffed up his chest until he looked, for all the world, like a shaggy rooster. And he said, "Who are you calling a human chicken?" And Rob thought very loudly to himself. He thought, you acorn-obsessed duster. And with that, see, he wasn't worried that the squirrel could hear him because squirrels, unlike many animals, are not telepathic at all. They're just a little nuts.
So with that, because unfortunately our show is just not long enough to hear the story the way we want to. Very, very briefly, like super, super quick, because we're out of seconds now. Okay. When can people see your show? How can they hear more of this story?
Well, World Storytelling Day is the spring equinox, which is March 20th. That's World Storytelling Day is like the global campfire. People from all over the world are hearing stories in all different venues. I have some support from Storytellers of Canada, and I have 3 shows. On March 20th at 7 o'clock at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church on Departure Bay Road. On the 23rd at the Poetry Yurt on Gabriola at 2 o'clock. In the Commons, and on Sunday the 24th at 2:30 at the Unitarian Hall, which is also the home of Around Town Tellers Stories on Fridays.
Fantastic. So we're going to give you a round of applause because you most definitely. Thank you so much for being part of our show. Hey, Matt, I know we're on our way out, aren't we?
Well, yeah, the show was also a little nuts, so I think that was actually pretty good timing.
It was a pretty good timing.
Exactly.
You bet.
Yeah, Cathy, thank you so much for being here. Kozar? See? That's how you do it.
I know how it's done. I'll get it. I'll get it.
You'll get it. Absolutely. No, Cathy, always wonderful work. And I got to say, love this segment because I also love, authors, writers. I've done some writing back in the day, studied it at VIU. Actually, I first thought I was going to get into sewing before writing, but then I realized the Hemingway wasn't for me.
Oh, dude.
The Hemingway wasn't for me. All right, no, seriously. So then I decided, well, I'm going to go some study writing down in Texas maybe. So I was Tolkien, a Twain, down a Plath to Austin to meet the king of literature and Seuss out the situation. It was a wild time. I ended up rolling my canoe back to Canada when things didn't work out. I got to say, it shook my confidence, but it didn't shake spirits. Shake spirits. All right, anyways, thank you to all of our guests, all of our volunteers, the staff in front of the camera, behind the scenes. Find more about the show on the Shaw Spotlight on Facebook, shawspotlight.ca as well. And if you have an event, cause, demonstration, really bad writing pun to give to the show, drop a line to our producer, Jocelyn Matwee. Also always looking for great volunteers to join us on the program as well. Before we go, one more song from the Kerplunks. Hand it back over to them. It's time for a little big string bass. Cheers, and thank you so much for watching the show on Shaw.
Ready or not, I'm gonna play my big string bass. Ready or not, I'm gonna play my big string bass. I'm gonna pull on the big fat string, really gonna make it swing. Tell you right now, I'm gonna play my big string bass. Yeah, Matt Carter. Well, the big string bass is the basement of our band. Big string bass is the basement of our band. I'm gonna build a good foundation to rock this celebration all across the nation on my big string bass. Here I go. Take this next solo. Morning, noon, and night. I play my big string bass morning, noon, and night. I play before breakfast time, right until dinner time.